A grab of reality. Background: my wife and I have been together 13 years, are in our mid-42s, 2 kids, both in high-pressured jobs, and pretty much have it all. We are extremely compatible on almost every level, highly educated and generally very rational human beings. She is a beautiful, strong, intelligent, and highly successful woman, but does suffer from mental health issues, including depression and low self-esteem, stemming from her upbringing. My personality can be described as friendly, open, and giving on the outside, but actually very hard to access on the inside. She is one of very few people who has ever managed to cross my deepest barriers, if that makes sense. We love each other wholeheartedly, and our long-term commitment to each other has never been in any doubt, including throughout our current predicament. Despite all this, we do have a number of long-term issues. Bonding has, for a long time, been a major issue. After the initial spike, our physical life rapidly deteriorated for several reasons. We were never super compatible in the bedroom. On the pure nitty-gritty physical side of things, there was an early conflict with a family member which led to some lingering resentment. This got resolved eventually, and the combination of having 2 kids and full-time jobs pretty much finished things off for a long time. She is a total garbage who needs mental stimulation to get a good time, and unfortunately it is often difficult for me to give her that when she needs it. To her, this feels like a real rejection of her needs, and she has become convinced that I do not fancy her or want to be intimate with her. This isn't at all true, but it makes complete sense that she feels that way, and I am entirely to blame for that. On the flip side, I am a very tactile person who thrives on small physical interaction, as expressions of love, affection, and desire, while she has a very strong dislike of being touched, unless it is as a prelude to bonding. As a result, we are both starved of the affirmation we need and crave from each other. We have discussed this openly and honestly many times, as we do with pretty much everything, but never mustered the time and energy to do enough about it. I am probably more to blame than she is in this regard, although neither side has made sufficient effort, and we both acknowledge that. Finally, I am much more of the nurturing type than she is, which means I do about 80 to 90% of taking care of the kids. I also do the majority of the housework, although this varies. She is by no means lazy, in fact quite the opposite, and is extremely capable of tackling grand projects, both at work and around the house, but not the day-to-day grind. Her depression is a major factor in this, still, despite her receiving active support for it. I don't mind this dynamic, in fact it fits my personality quite well, but oftentimes the sheer inequality of it does create resentment on my part. I tend to express this as coldness or sometimes passive aggressiveness, rather than tackling things head-on with her. Again, something I am working on. Naturally, such occasional coldness reinforces the feeling for her that I don't fancy her, or in fact love her all that much. Disclaimer: despite the issues laid out, we do talk and discuss things openly and honestly, and we are both in it for the long haul. We know the grass will never stay greener on the other side, even if it can seem that way on occasion. Fairly recent history: around 4 years ago my wife had what can best be described as an emotional affair with her boss. This was something that grew organically through their day-to-day interactions, and was very much initiated by him. As it turned out, the affable exterior hid a manipulative narcissist. He fitted her type: slightly older male, highly intelligent, nurturing, and supportive, at least on the surface of things, and in a position of power. They obviously spent a lot of time together at work, did a number of business trips abroad together, and so on. On a few occasions he pushed for things to get physical, but she never crossed that line, despite our non-existent physical life at that point. I do not doubt her in that, knowing fully well that she could have without me ever finding out. She confessed to me at some point to having a crush on him, told me about the times he tried to go for more, and was honest about having some feelings for him. This was painful to find out, and I resented her for seeking attention elsewhere. I felt I was giving her my all, but of course I was withholding the affirmation she actually needed. I acknowledge this in retrospect, but it was harder for me to see it at the time. This should have also been a wake-up call for both of us, but we never managed to resolve our issues properly, and sort of let the situation play out. I trusted her reassurances that this would work its way through her system, which it did, and that things would never get physical, which I still believe didn't. In the end, the process was sped up through an incident at her work, where he dropped her like a stone, but it set a precedent for more recent events. In early April we went through another super busy spell, were a bit cranky with each other, and had several arguments. Our lack of intimacy came up again, and once more my response were pretty lackluster, partly due to some resentment I was feeling towards her at the time for not pulling her weight around the house and kids. She had had a few drinks and was on her laptop while we were watching a movie. This is pretty standard. I noticed her typing a message but didn't think too much of it because we messaged for work at odd times a lot anyway. And she declared she was going to bed early, would sleep in the guest bedroom, and needed some privacy. I was a little taken aback and asked why, and she effectively said she needed space to masturbate since I wasn't going to step up to the plate. What worried me about that interaction was not so much the thing itself, but the message that was sent right before it happened. A day or so later, I did what I had never done in the 13 years before. I went and looked at her email. She is a bit of a Luddite and very careless with her devices. Read, no passcode on phone, leaves deleted emails in the trash folder, etc. As it turns out, her email was to a colleague, fancy that coffee. This was accompanied by a search history from that same evening of photos of him, public. Now this colleague is an early 50s male who she works with occasionally. Again, he fits her interest profile, intelligent, position of power, etc. What I knew at the time was that he had gone through a nasty divorce around a year prior. She'd given him some emotional support, and he had hinted at interest in her. There was an open invitation for coffee and a getting to know each other better outside the sphere of work. She had never responded to it, and in fact had mentioned it to me in passing, dismissing it as sweet but a little inappropriate, until that point. Now, clearly, she had A, taken him up on his invitation, and B, had a physical fantasy about him. I felt bad for snooping, and thought about this for several days, but ultimately confronted her about it. She was angry with me for going through her stuff and distrusting her, and initially tried to dismiss the intent and extent of the contact. After I explained how it made me feel, she relented and said sorry, and promised she'd kick the conversation into the long grass, which she did. Easter holiday. For Easter we went away on a holiday, family visit for 10 days. Frustratingly, she received a work assignment a few days prior, which meant she would have to do some work while we were away. We discussed it and agreed that she should take the assignment, as long as she would minimize its impact. As it turned out, she spent 5 full days working on it, while I was left to look after the kids on my own. I was annoyed with her about this, and we left with a fair degree of coldness. I went home with the kids. She stayed over for another week for a number of business meetings. After she came back, last weekend, the feeling of distance was still there, but off and on. Some moments were close, some were distant. The evening she came back she was probing for bonding, and we actually spent the bank holiday morning in bed, and did it twice. Sorry for the detail. We talked some more about our intimacy problem, and how we would try and work on it. The rest of the day was a happy one, but what I didn't realize was that something else was going on in the background. This past week, Tuesday was pretty uneventful, but on Wednesday morning she was extremely off. She spent most of the morning downstairs with her laptop, wouldn't come up to the home office to start her work, spent time wandering around the garden gazing into space. I noticed, of course, offered to help, talk about it, and so on. She was her normal self with me and said it had all been too much work-wise and she was feeling a bit burnt out, stressed, etc. I did not question this to begin with. It would be entirely understandable if she felt like that, but as the day went on something did not feel right. So, in the evening, as she was making dinner, I checked her laptop again and found she had been using a Gmail address. Now, she has never had Gmail or any private social media, so this was highly suspect to me. The worry kept me up for most of the night, and in the end, I checked into that Gmail address to find out what was going on. As it turned out, she had reached out again to the colleague mentioned above on the final night of her business trip, fancy a chat. He was a bit slow to respond, and they exchanged a few innocuous messages on Sunday and Monday, but on Tuesday the tone changed. First, she asked him to switch to his private email. Then, she asked him about his intentions when he asked her for coffee that time. Then the chat rapidly went downhill from there. I have been able to check in on their conversation since. She is unaware of this, but she knows I have looked at her computer. She thinks she's covered her tracks, but she's terrible at that and the signs are all over the place. Here are some excerpts, anonymized, from the chat. Tuesday evening. W. When you asked me out for coffee, did you ask me out for coffee or for coffee? Him. At the time and knowing your circumstances it was for a coffee with no hidden agenda. Under different circumstances I would ask you out for a coffee. W. By the way, if circumstances were different, I would have come for coffee and the biscuits. Seriously bad, I know. Him. I think the coffee and biscuits would have been amazing. W. I am in awe of smart people, and you are pretty much at the pinnacle of the smarts. Him. You definitely win the series Smart Award. Hope you don't mind me saying. W. I know what you mean about sharing stuff. I always feel like that when I travel. It's probably why I emailed you late at night after I'd had wine. Him. Hope you're not regretting the wine-induced email. Wednesday morning. W. I spent last night thinking about the hope you're not regretting the wine-induced email. I know you didn't mean it as a question, but I feel like I need to address this. I have never cheated on my husband before this email conversation, which I do regard as a form of cheating, albeit not as bad as others. Do I regret it? At this moment I feel numb about it, but I do have my reasons. You have always been so kind to me, you are super impressive, and I spent lockdown wondering if you were into me. I am conflicted, but, in this moment, I don't regret it. I spent last night thinking about you, what I'd like you to do to me, and I am fighting the urge to tell you in detail about it. I need a cold shower. W. Your breakup must have been awful for you, and whatever else I owe you a hug. I'll just try and keep my tongue in my mouth. Him. Thank you so much for being so open with me. It's amazing. I must admit that I had quite a sleepless night too. I must admit that there was a serious wow factor when I first met you. Cards on the table. I am most definitely into you. I would love you to tell me what you would like me to do to you, although I have quite a few ideas myself. Off to a cold shower too, although a hot shower shared is much more fun. At this point, I confronted her about my suspicion, without revealing that I already knew every single detail. I know this is manipulative of me, but I had to see whether she would confess and tell me everything. It took several days, and a good number of very emotional chats, to get most of it out of her. Initially she didn't want to talk about it, said this was just something small that would pass without any consequence, and so on. But the chat with him continued, even though the innuendo got dialed down. Thursday. Him, not sure if I should confess my age. I'm actually 52. What about you? Still can't quite believe that you may have feelings for me. W, I am 44, although you make me feel about 18. I have made you a non-corporeal mixtape. The thought of how well you can keep a beat does things to me physically. Sorry, I shouldn't be provocative. Him, the trouble with drummers is that they speed up when the adrenaline kicks in. Please be provocative. On Friday I was very confrontational, having read what they exchanged and knowing my earlier intervention had not made any difference. I accused her of initiating and continuing an emotional affair. She was super defensive about it, but eventually acknowledged it, although she still maintains that things didn't turn dirty in tone. She has been contrite since, saying she's sorry, will do whatever she can to make me feel safe. This was her last message to him. Friday. W, hiya, I am not ghosting you, but I need some time, okay? Keep safe. Him, of course, fully understand. Keep safe too. We have since talked more about this, and things feel somewhat better. There is certainly an intention on both sides to fix things, and I know she is genuinely sorry about what she has done. However, things are still very raw for me. I still worry constantly, because I know she is still leaving out certain details and left the chat very open-ended. I do not feel I can 100% trust her at this moment. She has a business trip coming up Monday to Wednesday. I guess I will be following her secret Gmail to see how this ends, or continues, which would honestly break my heart and cause very long-lasting damage. I ask, sorry, there was a hell of a lot to get off my chest. I don't know if I should have shared all that detail, but I had to tell someone. You've probably read this all a million times before. I don't feel much anger or resentment, and I don't even really blame her for what happened. I acknowledge my own role in the build-up to all this, and my responsibility in resolving the situation and building an even stronger foundation for our marriage. I did want to end with a specific ask. I don't need solution or marriage advice. The root causes are well known to both of us, and we are determined to fix those. Would you judge her intention was to keep things within the boundaries of an emotional affair, chat, fantasy, as she has claimed? Or would you say that the intention was there from the start to cross over into more intimate interactions, texting, photos, etc., or even end up with a full-on physical affair? I have no doubt he would go for it, despite her claims that he's the nicest guy and not a home wrecker, but I have been unable to discern her ultimate intentions. Maybe she didn't have a clear idea where this would lead to, I just don't know. She maintains that this was only ever about relatively harmless attention-seeking, but I am doubtful given the speed and intensity with which the chat developed, and the readiness with which they admitted desires to one another. I am also worried about his mention of feelings. Desires and lust are one thing, but feelings are a completely different level. She never actually mentioned feelings towards him, only an interest and physical attraction, but it can get very messy if she fans that flame in a colleague. I have, although I am playing some cards close to my chest, and she has responded appropriately. The business trip will not be the both of them, otherwise I would have indeed insisted she cancels it, or sleeps with a Zoom link on all night, which was actually one of her suggestions. I know it can be hard to judge a situation purely by reading a biased account on here, and it is tricky to convey our connection and depth or our relationship. As I said, I had no reason to distrust her for 13 years, and in many ways I still don't. She's a terrible liar, and whenever I press her, I know whether she is telling the truth or deflecting, playing things down. I know she didn't go there with her old boss, and that's not me being naive, but the combination of factors in this case puts her intentions in a much different light. And yes, I did already acknowledge my own failings in this, and they are being addressed, partly as a result of this coming out. People will find a way to cheat if they really want to, and it would be pointless pretending I could take away that opportunity. I travel a lot for work as well. You can always nip out of work and get a room for an hour or two, or at a pinch there's the office desk. The only way to prevent that is from having a strong enough relationship, which, by and large, we do, and ensure there is nothing serious lacking, which admittedly I neglected in the past. Divorce would be the ultimate sanction but is not on the cards from either side. The reason for my wait and see comment is that she will be alone in a hotel room for 2 nights with plenty of time to decide if she wants to go ahead with, now that it is out in the open, or if she backs down. Her thinking she is unobserved in this will ensure that whatever she decides is genuine. I guess time will tell. She has not checked into her Gmail account since that final message. We are unhappy about one specific aspect of our relationship, but in every other way we have blown every other relationship out of the water. We've both been in the game long enough to know that we've found the right one, soulmates, without trying to be sounding corny. Getting a divorce would be a total knee-jerk and guarantee we both end up unhappy. Despite our history and what she has done, there is no doubt in my mind that things can be fixed. She desperately needed my affection and affirmation, and I for years neglected that side of our relationship. We both did in our own ways, to be fair. I ignored the warning signs for too long. That's on me. Would nobody who loves their partner do this? I think the statistics clearly show that that is nonsense. Relationships are messy gray zones full, and when pushed too far, people can make the wrong decision. Just look around the forum here, 1,000 stories, 1,000 nuances. Although I hardly blame her at all for what happened, that doesn't mean I'm not hurt, upset and angry about it. But this is balanced out by a deep and reciprocal love and connection. Her heart was never the issue. It's the body and mind that need to be given the right reasons for staying where they are. She had no problem crossing that first boundary. After all, she waited long enough to do so despite having tons of opportunities. Others may question this, but I stand by that assessment. The emotional drain on her was also plain to see the morning she caved and fully committed to it. However, you are right that every border we cross, it becomes that much easier to take the next step. One can never fully come back from that position, and this is certainly a long-term concern, even if we patch things up. I feel the same way about the Friday afternoon post. She was clearly still on the fence then. Her behavior since has changed dramatically, and this is worth mentioning. However, I will not rest easy until I see the type of message you describe, written in private. Even then, this will always leave some residual damage. Look up the statistics. It's hard to get an accurate number, but online cheating and emotional affairs are staggeringly common. It is a line most of us will cross at some point in our lives, and it would be hypocritical to think I would never do that. Moving into dirty territory is another matter, however, and actually getting physical is yet another step down the line. Each is harder to forgive and overcome. I am in a position of power. This has been an issue at some point in our relationship, but not for the past 5 or so years. It is also very clear what she wants from me, and what I need to improve, very much along the lines of your suggestions. I know this and am acting on it. Better late than never. Wish me luck. And it may appear that I am approaching this clinically, but that is because I am discussing a very difficult emotional topic with a group of anonymous strangers. Comment: regardless of the details, the fact remains that she did not tell the other man, that it is over. Your suspicions may be right that she will pick things up again when she is away, or it could be that she has already picked things up again using a communication method that you are not aware. But whatever, if this guy is as hot for your wife, it would be nothing for him to meet with her on her trip, planned with her, or him just showing up. OP responds: for sure, except I know her extremely well, including her lack of managing anything related to modern technology. And she is unaware that I know of her secret Gmail account. She has no reason to use any other means of communication. If anything gets arranged, it will be through there, and I will know. I have no doubt that he would travel after her for a chance to make good on their chats. I've already mentioned that where there is a will, there is a way. In our line of work, with constant travel and lots of interactions, there is zero way of policing a determined cheater. I am actively working to win back her mind, and have done everything I can, for now, barring the nuclear options, to stop things in their tracks. It is down to her now to demonstrate that her change is genuine. We have considered counseling, but never committed to it. Frankly, we both know where the problem lies and what needs to be done about it. Will that remain sufficient forever, assuming we fix things now? I don't know, but neither does anyone else. For what it's worth, it is worth giving it every chance. I am not yet convinced that this is about needing attention and validation from other men. She didn't get it from me, and that made her look elsewhere. She's looking for the exact thing she wanted from me, and is clearly conflicted about her choices. It remains to be seen if her need disappears when we put in sufficient effort and communication. Update: people were all right. I was wrong. I don't think there is a way back from this for us. Devastated. My comment: OP left a simple ending without much detail. Your wife is cheating and you're rationalizing everything she says and everything you say to justify her affairs and your hope to have a workable marriage. You're asking advice but not really wanting to hear the hard truth. You love the idea of the wife you want, but your wife is not that person. Depression, mental issues are not an excuse to engage in an affair. Adults don't have emotional affairs that don't turn physical. I agree with others that you are being played by your wife. You also appear to be the one doing all the heavy lifting and the emotional aspects in your marriage. You can't work on any of this by yourself, and your wife doesn't seem interested in working on things. She seems to be telling you what you want to hear, and she knows what to say to make you feel temporarily reassured. Story 2. We also have a 12-year-old son. Okay, so, I have known my no-hubby since middle school. We ran into each other a decade later after middle school and immediately hit it off. First, let me say, I grew up in adultery. My dad cheated on my mom. I saw that pain, then after they divorced, I watched her again broken into a million pieces after the man of 8 years she was deeply in love with cheated on her as well. Pushing forward, my first real relationship, though still very young, was a 7-year relationship that ended due to him having multiple affairs. We lived together, luckily didn't marry or have any kids. Again, I was still very young and had so much ahead of me. I got out of that awful relationship, meeting my no hubby roughly 4 months later. Not meeting him for the first time, but running into an old friend that quickly led to a relationship. We dated 5 years before getting married. He knew my past and my upbringing around and in the midst of infidelity my whole life. He knew that it had caused me a ton of pain, and we talked religiously about cheating. He knew that was the one thing I just couldn't bear. He was so good to me, so loving and nurturing, promising me he would never ever put me through that kind of pain. He would, I thought, protect me, guard me, love me, and of course never betray me on that level. So, I thought. So, we married. Roughly 3 years or so after marriage, I had our first and only son. Best thing ever. Well, when my son was around 2, my hubby, who loved me so much, all of a sudden out of nowhere decided he wasn't sure if he loved me, asking me to leave while he figured things out. I was floored, hurt, abandoned, lost, grasping for air. So before this happened, maybe a few months prior, I found a message on his phone through FB from an old school friend of his that simply said, "I hate this." I questioned him, of course. Of course, I was overreacting, being paranoid, I was crazy, etc. He even had her message me saying she had messaged the wrong person. My gut told me otherwise, but my heart wanted to believe him. Okay, so my toddler and I went to stay with my mom for a week or so, eventually coming home. Moving forward, 5 years ago, my hubby wakes me up at 6 a.m. wanting to talk. He was trembling and crying. Again, I had already had a gut feeling for roughly 6 to 8 months something was off. He was distant. I questioned him repeatedly, even asking if he was cheating many times. Even pinpointing the girl that he may be cheating with, asking him directly if he and this girl were having an affair. Before his confession during 6 to 8 month affair, he made me feel completely ignorant on every level. Again, he tells me he is not sure if he loves me. He again tells me I'm paranoid, that I was crazy and imaging stuff. He said I was pushing him away by accusing him of adultery. Well, then comes the confession. Too much pain. He told this woman he loved her. He wrote her a love letter telling her he couldn't believe someone like her was into him. He went shopping with her, went around her child in her home, bashed me in the way I dressed to this woman. He was working so much, so late, but he was with her. Every chance he could get he was with her, even chasing down a guy he thought she was seeing out of jealousy. He left me one night in tears, broken and begging him to not leave me. He said his mom gave him money for a hotel room so he could figure some things out. BS. He went to her, staying the night with her. So, he confesses everything. Tells me everything is going to change, he loves me, and will spend the rest of his life making this up to me. He made me feel safe and loved. He told me everything I needed to hear. So, I thought, okay, I can give this a go. I love him, still do. I know he loves me too. So, when he confused, over the course of a few days and weeks, I asked him several times about the first time I had my gut feeling, years prior with his old classmate. Asked had there been an affair. Absolutely not, he said. I just knew better, and I had to find out the truth, and so I did just that. What a nightmare. The girl years prior, who he had messaged me saying she had accidentally messaged him on accident. Well, they had an affair years prior, this actually being the first affair. This particular affair lasted 6 years, with one of my son's elementary teacher's wife. I spoke with the hubby, who had moved forward and remarried, but the things I found out about this 6-year affair literally broke my soul. The ex told me he caught them, via texts at least on 3 different occasions. He even called my hubby telling him to stop seeing his wife. Did they stop? Hell no. The ex even tried to reach out to me, but my hubby and his wife did everything they could to stop him from making contact with me. I was crushed. Multiple affairs, both emotionally involved affairs, telling these women he loved them. I literally just found out all of this a year ago. The second affair that he confessed to, I honestly think I could have dealt with that. I've been in therapy, but a year later after finding out about his 6-year affair, I'm still a mess. I hurt, I feel so betrayed on so many levels. I feel like I don't know my hubby. The better part of our marriage was spent with him living this double life. While I took all the heat because I was jealous, crazy, paranoid, ridiculous. I mean, I literally felt like I was crazy. I still can't get past it. I cry so much. I'm numb, and I have this gut feeling I can't shake. I am honestly lost, and don't know what to do. It's horrible, especially when you love this person. And I do love him. 20 years is a long time. Again, I know he loves me too, and perhaps he may never cheat again. However, it happened. Twice. He is literally a piece of me. We were supposed to live and die by one another. I have literally tried and continue to battle in my brain what it is I should do. Losing him would be like grieving the loss of a family member, because he is family. He is all I know. It sucks, but I battle daily with this immense pain, ups and downs, depression, anxiety, hoping it will cease. Praying, just always praying. But at the same time, always hurting, never understanding. He has been my provider. He is the breadwinner, however, he does not hold this over my head. But he has been my sole provider. I was a stay-at-home mom for many years. When I did work, it wasn't for bills. He has a retirement and an investment to the side of that set up for our retirement. I yet to have a retirement. I fear I couldn't provide for myself. Change is hard. The hardest part is my sin being caught up in the middle of this storm. My son loves me and his dad very much. He is deeply attached to both of us. My husband is an amazing father, I'll give him that. All I wanted was to give my son something special, a gift. The gift of two parents staying married. I didn't want him to endure being in the midst of a broken family like myself. I can't imagine what this would do to him. This whole situation is so painful, confusing, and unfair. I wished I could just shut down my obsessive thoughts for just a day. OP's husband responds, "We are working it out and have been doing great. People act like someone can't change. FYI, she has a great paying job making $19 an hour, plus she has exercised her whole life and still does to this day. You people bashing without know both side and the whole story." I came to my wife and told her about the affair because I knew I was doing wrong and had to try to make things right and make a change in my life to save my family, so I came clean to her. How many cheaters come clean to their spouse? There are things that happened on the other end of this that caused me to lose focus of my marriage early on in it, but I will not drag the other through the mud in this post, but just know she has had her ups and downs too, but still I shouldn't have gotten lost and stayed on the course of our vows. To call me a piece of crap of a father is way out of line considering the things I do with my son on the daily, and I'm always trying to include the wife in our activities even before all this, and she wouldn't go because she just doesn't care to do the things we do, but I still ask. She has her freedom. I let her go out to bars with friends and alone to a bar that she knows the owner so she can earn me time. Oh, and to tell all our friends and family. The joke's on you cause they all know, even my son. We are a small family that is sticking this out and fighting for our little family of 3. You know, some people do make changes, but these people that will turn your back on someone that has an addiction, in prison, or an alcoholic instead of giving them chances to turn their life around. It's a damn good thing she doesn't listen to this crap. She is a fighter and has been her whole life. The one thing she has been taught in life is she makes her own decisions, not what someone else tells her to do, and yes, I'm a very lucky man to still have my wife standing beside me through this marriage of ours and helping me confirm that we have made it through this together. My comment: at this point I would show some humility and just be grateful that your wife is actually willing to give you another chance to work on your marriage. I hope you will reflect on your actions and realize the pain that it's caused and that the trust can never come back fully. Infidelity is a terrible thing to do to somebody, especially someone who loves you and who you are supposed to love as well. I don't know if you can understand that type of pain unless you've been in their shoes.